Hello, welcome back. This is Vincenz, and today we are playing 3.24. So we've got an extra large hangar, we're in Orison, and we are just pulling up some fighter ships to stow away in the hangar. So if we ever need to come back quickly and get in a fighter ship, we've got them here ready. We're trying to fit the Cutlass Red. Would be useful to have a medic ship, but unfortunately that does not fit in the little alcoves. Here we put a few bikes down, ready to load in at any moment. And it's pretty cool having all this stuff available to you so you don't have to stay calling them out all the time. Sometimes you die, you get put back at base, and you just need to get back in the action quickly. So we're setting up here, we're using the medical beds, putting a few guns on there, and some guns not on there. We put a few tractor beams laying around just in case we have friends over and we need to do a bit of loading. Here we try and use the gear terminal, and nothing was showing. So we ended up looking like this. Now we're going to upgrade our ship. So the Corsairs first, of course, my favourite ship. And we're just going to fit military grade A components. Next we're going to take off the standard missiles that come with the Corsair. And we are going to fit new missile racks with 8 size 1 missiles on each. So instead of 8 missiles with 2 on each, we're going to have 32 missiles. That's 4 racks with 8 on each. Straight away it was time to go and test ERTs, and I was hoping to collect some cargo and store it back in my warehouses back at base. Obviously I also wanted to test the selling at the scrapyards now, because apparently it's very different when you've got the lift that goes up and down. So this was our first ERT. As usual, the scanner did not want to work off the bat, so this first ship we have to go in and take a look for ourselves. Luckily it had some loot. We've got some Taranite here, and we've got 2 SCU of Weaver legs. So that's about 250 plus K just in that one ship. And we go ahead and scan the rest of the ships. Here we've got some quite good loot as well. About 150 K's worth of Quantanium. So now we've got some drugs on board, it was time to head down to Brios's and test out this new elevator system and see how it all works. So we just did a little test with these 2 SCU of Weave legs, and we just wanted to make sure it was working before we go ahead and start looting all the ships and coming back here to sell stuff. Otherwise we'd just store them in the warehouse. But this first visit seemed to be working very well, and we transferred the loot down, and then we would head off and sell it. We throw on 1 Altrusia toxin that we had in the back as well, and we head over to the selling terminal. Here we can see our drugs. We've got the Altrusia toxin and the Gasping Weaver legs. Gasping Weaver legs only selling for 168k, that's 84,000 per unit. And the Altrusia toxin still selling for 5.6k. Now I think this has been hotfixed since then, and now the Weaver legs are back up to 112,000.5. Now back to Orison to unload the Quantanium and the Taranite and a few medical supplies. So we were loading these down into our warehouse, we wanted to store it all in there, and then it was time to go and test out the TDD in the hope that we could just sell all the loot that we've just put in our warehouse. There it was, all loaded up safely, and it's pretty cool. The fact that you can just store all your loot in here and deal with it as and when you want, I think is an absolutely brilliant idea. So we lowered down the Corsair, and it was time to head to the TDD. Upon arrival at the TDD, we selected our Orison storage, and it showed a load of little things, but unfortunately it did not show our Quantanium or our Taranite or our medical supplies. This was a known issue at the start of 3.24, and I still can't sell any of my cargo that is stored in my warehouse. The Altrusia toxin we can see, which was on board the ship, is still sat there and it is visible. So we headed back out, knowing that we could now sell our drugs and store our drugs. It was time to start stocking up, building a stockpile of cargo, so as and when we need cash we can just go ahead, take some containers, hand them in, and get the cash we need. So the ERTs at the moment are absolutely awesome. The ships seem to be flying really well, and the enemies are smooth and they're not jerking all over the place. So here I'm picking off the engines of the Caterpillar one by one, and that seems to kill that ship a lot quicker than normal. And the same with the C2, always like to go for the engines. So it looks like we're going to have some good times in 3.24, because we straight away found 18 SCU of weevil eggs. So the first few ERTs that we've done, we've got some great loot, we've got some Quantanium stored in the warehouse, and now we've got a nice payday of about 2 million plus. So quickly chuck them in the back of the Corsair. And it was back to Brios's again to get our payday. So this is on the next ERT now, and an 890 jump with nothing in it. Quite a rare find. And we did have quite a few ships that did have nothing on them, so you just got to keep going. I'd say maybe 30% of the ships had some good loot on them, 10%, 20% had just loot on them, and then 50% of the ships had no loot whatsoever. That is quite a good thing as well. You don't keep jumping out for just little tiny bits of loot with every ship. So it's not too bad when you find empty ships. You just move on, go to the next mission, and hopefully you'll find some good loot soon enough. The ERTs are in a good state if you ask me. I quite like this mix. I quite like the loot that I've been getting, and you do get quite a good return on your time invested in playing the ERT missions. On this particular ship, the list popped down so quick I had to open it up and check what was in there. And on other ships you can see like there, 12 SCU of Quantanium, that's got to be picked up. You might as well grab the medical supplies as well while you're here. I will show you a bit later in this video that the scanner does not always tell the truth, so I'm going to start checking a lot more now. But in this case it was empty, and time to move on to the next one. Here we've got a Corsair, and even though it hasn't got much loot, I would say there is some good loot in little ships as well. Normally I would just pay attention to the C2s or the M2s or the A2s, but now you do have to double check all the little ships as well, because some of them have had some good stuff. We've had a Taurus with about 12 SCU of weevil eggs in there, so you don't want to be passing that up. There's the 600i. Not had much good loot in it, or not had any good loot in it for a few months now. Here's a Taurus, and that one's got 6 SCU of Quantanium, so, you know, you've got to go and get that, really. Here's a Corsair, 5 medical supplies, 3 ultratoxin, and 1 Quantanium. Maybe you'd nip in and pick that one up if you need the cash. Here we have the Caterpillars as usual, completely bugged with no loot. And I've not seen any good loot in the Reclaimers in this patch. I've not seen any loot inside them at all, which is also a good thing because it's a nightmare to get in and out of that ship. Here we go with the Taurus again, and this one again, I'm going to get in there and take that stuff. 5 ultratoxin, it's about 30k, isn't it? Might as well. Here I am at the end of an ERT, and I had this Reclaimer left to kill. And using my ballistic guns, I think I was using the deadbolts, And we ran out of ammo altogether. And I was on my own, so all I could think of doing was jumping in a turret and seeing if I could get lucky and he'd come in the right angles, and then I could finish him off. So that is a big drawback of using these ballistics. It might take a bit longer to kill things with the lasers, but you never run out of bullets. And when you're doing ERT after ERT after ERT, it can be quite annoying to have to go and restock your weapons after every ERT. Anyway, luckily this guy was hanging around above us, and we got in the remote turret, and he was nearly dead already, and the turret did the rest. So it was quite a long fight, that, and unfortunately it was a complete waste of time because that reclaimer had absolutely nothing in it. But then straight away on the next ERT we ran out of bullets again, and this time we tried quite a few different turrets. We tried the remote turret, and the guy did not want to come into line of sight at all. And then we even had to try the left turret, and he was still out of line of sight. So we just couldn't quite hit him. Anyway, eventually on the right turret, he did come into line of sight, and we finished him off. And it was definitely worth it for this guy, because he's got 33 SCU of Ultratoxin on there. So once we collected that, it was back down to Brios's again. And this was quite a funny one, because we had such a big container of Ultratoxin, we couldn't actually put it on the elevator. Even though I completely missed it there, I eventually get it on the elevator. And it just wouldn't fit on the elevator, so I don't know what you're supposed to do with these massive containers. Maybe I can sell it at Crew L4. Maybe with these big containers, you've just got to load up a C2 and head to Crew L4 and sell them on the secret terminal there. Anyway, we loaded that back in the ship, and it was time just to nip to Seraphim and put it in the warehouse at Seraphim Station. I do put all my drugs at Seraphim, and I put all my legal stuff at Orison. Obviously, I want to be able to sell them at Orison, which I can't do at this point. And at Seraphim, I can just nip in, grab what I need to get, and get out of there. So, landing. I always keep landing straight, as we're used to, but nowadays you've got to jig the ship a little bit, just so your cargo bay is facing the elevators. And here we have the big 32 SCU container, and a few little ones. So we move them across to the warehouse, and we can get out of here straight away. Back out doing the ERTs, and this ship's got 55 SCU of medical supplies, and it's also got 11 SCU of Altrusia toxin. And as you can see there, there's only about 6 or 7 things in that list. But this is what I was talking about before when I was talking about the scanner. So once I get in there, I'm looking for the Ultratoxin, I'm looking for the bits that it said on the list, but as you'll see here, we find a lot more than it told us. So first of all, there's 1 Quantanium that was not on the list. Ultratoxin, that was on the list. Next one, another 2 SCU of Quantanium, not on the list. And here, an even bigger container of Quantanium. So there was probably about 200,000-300,000 there that it didn't even mention on the scanner. So this is why in future I'm going to check everything a bit more carefully. So we loaded all this up into the back of the ship. And we took some medical supplies as well. Why not while you're here? And what I do like about this expansion is I'm constantly filling up my cargo bay, and I'm constantly having to go and deal with all the cargo. And it is much better than just picking up one little container at a time from random ships. Here again, we've got 8 medical supplies, 6 Ultratoxin. You got to go and get it. Here another Caterpillar, and as usual these days, it's completely empty. What a great cargo ship that is. Here we've got the Starfarer. They're empty a lot nowadays. And now we've got another C2, and we can see inside this one. So taking a look at it, we've got 57 SCU of medical supplies, and we've got 10 Ultratoxin and 1 Quantanium. So again, we're going to take that, and we'll either store it back at Seraphim, or we'll go and hand it in straight away at Brios. The cargo is a lot more snappy now, and every container seems to have real weight to it. You can just feel the weight of the containers a lot more when you're maneuvering them. And the way they lock down on the floor, it's really got this sort of satisfying connection. Even though this particular container would not lock down, and I don't know why, because it should have. It's the correct size for the Corsair, but it just would not lock to the grid. Anyway, back to Seraphim to put them all in the warehouse, and we'll hand them in at another time when we need the cash, or when we've got a party and we can protect each other while we unload all these containers. You do feel pretty vulnerable now when you're at the salvage yards, because you're just there for quite a while unloading containers and people can just see on the elevator exactly what you've got. So it does make the whole handing in of drugs a lot more risky, I think. So down go the goods, and because we've loaded in quite a few medical supplies, even at Seraphim Station here, you can nip up to the terminals and you can sell all your medical supplies. So they don't take up a lot of space and they're not constantly filling up your warehouse. So you nip up to the gallery, head to the right up the stairs, and straight away on your left hand side is the trade terminals. Unfortunately you can't sell anything else here like Quantanium or Taranite or Bexolite, but for some reason you can sell medical supplies. You can also see the drugs we've got in the warehouse as well. Obviously you can't sell them there, but it is good when you go on this screen that you can just see everything you've got in your warehouse. I did have a little issue with selecting the different size containers and just selecting all the containers. For some reason that didn't work too well, and obviously there you can see it was going to sell for nothing, so I didn't bother selling it at all. Back in the warehouse now, I got myself an ASCU box of my own, which I bought from the cargo center. And what I wanted to do was try and load up a few of the smaller containers into this one box. We have heard that you can do that before the patch came out, so I wanted to test this out. And, you know, when you're loading a lot of cargo, if you can put them all into boxes of ASCU before you have to do all your loading, I think that's a really cool idea. So here we get about 4 2SCU containers of Altrusia toxin, and we stack them all into our ASCU box. Once the box was full, I checked inside, make sure everything was there, and even though it looks like 6, it does say 8 out of 8 SCU up at the top. So we grabbed the Corsair, and we were going to go and try and sell this now at Brios, see how it works, whether we could just put that whole crate on the elevator, or whether we had to unpack it in the warehouse and then sell it separately. Much easier to load than 3 separate containers. It took me a third of the time, and I can get out of here quickly. So we go to load it on the elevator, and the box just completely vanishes. It's not in the warehouse, you can see there, so that was quite worrying. So we call up the lift just to see maybe it's still on the lift, and luckily there it was. So we lower it back down and head over to the terminal to sell. Once we get to the terminal, we cannot see anything, so we know that we've loaded an ASCU box, and we know it has ASCU in there of Altrusia toxin, but they just weren't showing on this screen at all. Our only other option was to head back over to the elevator, look into our warehouse, unpack the box by just dragging stuff out of it. And we put these containers on the lift. So there they were, we were just checking they have been unpacked. And now it was time to lower them back down and go and see if we could sell them. There we can see on the right hand side that our ASCU box is still sat there. And at this point it's completely empty and the Altrusia toxin is separated from it. So we head back to the terminal. And now luckily as we open the terminal we can see our ASCU. We press the max button and we click sell. So 45k, that's not bad for bringing one box. And we bring our box back up again and load it back into the Corsair. So that's definitely going to be a good feature when you've got loads of containers to load. Just go in the warehouse, stack all the boxes full, take them wherever you want to go, and then unpack them before you sell them. Now we're back at Brios again. This time we've got a few Weevil eggs, about 300k's worth. But as we're unloading, we've come under fire from the NPCs. And it was quite cool, you know, there's more pressure now when you're unloading. I had killed a ship on the way into this, and then as I was loading, another ship has come. So the NPC action around these bases is quite intense now. They've definitely upped it a lot. And I think if you're going to come here and want to feel secure, you're going to need someone up in the air just to fend off these ships while you're unloading. It was quite stressful trying to get all the drugs off and get them on the elevator while someone's shooting my ship. I did have the shields on full, so I was hoping they'd hold, but as you can see there's ballistics raining in from that cutlass, and they're definitely going to do damage to my hull. So I quickly get these goods on the elevator as well, and I'll load them down as fast as I can. This guy just wasn't going to stop, so I had to get back in my ship, head up and take him out. You can see the ship's a little bit red on the front, so we did take some damage, but most of the ship was holding alright. I don't know how many ballistic weapons this guy's got, but he's been shooting me now for a good 4 or 5 minutes. I did hear that they were going to do it realistically, so if the enemy had 300 ballistic bullets, they could only fire 300 ballistic bullets. Now I could land and sell my drugs. As soon as I get out of my ship, I see more bullets coming in. They look like they're coming from a bit further away on the horizon, so I go for it. So we leg it over to the terminal. We've got a few hundred Ks worth of Weaver legs and we want to get the money. So we select Brios Breaker Yard. And we've got our gasping Weaver legs here. They're only showing 84,000 per SCU. I still can't get my head around that. I didn't hear about a nerf. And it would only let me sell 1 SCU. This time it said it was 1 SCU, but it actually let me sell both the 2 SCUs that I had, which was a bit weird. So there is a few little bugs hanging around these terminals. Anyway, we sell off the rest of our stuff okay. And I found using that max button is the easiest way just to get everything gone ASAP. So we can still hear the ships getting peppered, and there's another cutlass now in the air. This one is absolutely hammering my ship. The wings already come off, but I still think I can get in and get out of there. And we've still got 12 SCU of Quantanium on the ship. This is now the 3rd ship that's come and attacked me while I was doing my unloading. And as you can hear, he is hammering my ship. And just as I get on board, the ship goes boom. And unfortunately, we lost all our loot. So again, I would heavily recommend bringing a friend or someone in another ship, and they can protect you while you unload. Now in 3.24, we've heard it's the cargo patch. So this was my first attempt at doing a hauling mission. I'm not really into this kind of stuff. Flying around space, just dropping things off. As much fun as flying is, that's not really what I'm up for, just flying around constantly and dropping things here, there and everywhere. But, you know, some people do love that. I'm a bit more of a combat man myself. Anyway, we thought we'd just quickly try this out. So we found the loot under that missions tab, which is a new little tab that pops up when you've got a mission. And I transfer everything up to the hangar. So there they are, my 8 SCU of titanium. And I quickly get them loaded into my ship, and I've got to take them to Orison. So in 2 minutes we're at Orison. We land in the super large hangar at a nice angle so we can load things off for the elevator. And it was quite an easy mission. You know, this starter mission is literally going from Seraphim Station down to Orison. Obviously they get much longer, deliver to Microtech, deliver to Area 18. And I think the quantities will get a lot bigger as well. I've heard a lot of boys in the guild talking about it. I'd rather go and do my bounty hunting stuff straight away when the game gets launched. But this will be something maybe when I'm traveling from one place to another that I might just grab a mission for the sake of it, if it's going to earn me some money. But I can't really see myself doing too much of this. So we've got it all on the elevator, and as we're about to lower it down, it tells us that we've got a contract order and that we're going to hand this in for completion. So we transfer down to the warehouse, and that is our cargo mission done. As the goods go down, we get a pop-up which tells us we've completed the mission, and it was pretty simple. Now, more exciting things are happening in 3.24. Apparently the comm arrays are now working, and that will allow us to do the Vaughn missions. We have done many of them previously. I haven't really posted them on the channel because I always used to end up in prison. And then we'd either die trying to escape, or we'd have to go down into the mines and kill a lot of people, which is pretty boring. Here we are arriving at our first comm array in the new patch. I couldn't remember exactly where I needed to park, so it took me a moment just to figure it out. But luckily, arriving in the Corsair, we didn't get blown up straight away. I've been here in the past in my Hornet and didn't go that well. You really have to fly down at the right angle and get a good parking spot, then you're safe. So we jump out of the elevator in the Corsair and we nearly die because we've got no helmet on. So at this moment, we're pretty anxious to see if these comm arrays are working. As we get down there, there's a button to press on the screen. And at this point, I think it's time for us to get our Tiger Claw, and instantly it says insert. We have not seen that insert button many times in the past, but it worked first time straight away. And here we go, it was accessing the system, and we just had to wait around with our gun out just in case someone came to try and stop us. But after a short while, we were on the last loading bar, and we could finally take down the comm array. This is big news for Star Citizen. The fact that you can now do illegal missions and not get prison time for it, I think is absolutely fantastic, and this is how the game was meant to work. So we take down the comm link, and as you can see in the top left of the screen there's a little red exclamation mark, and that is telling us that the comm link is either down or about to go down, but we have successfully got rid of the comm link around Daymar. So, we head up to do our first Vaughn mission. It's a very challenging task. We are quite high on the rep. We've done quite a few of these, as I say. And normally you can just sort of fly up to them and scan them. But in this latest patch, I've noticed that they are moving around a lot. They used to move a little bit, but not like this. So what became very frustrating is trying to scan them before we entered combat. That's what we normally do, so we know which ship we've got to be careful with. But it is proving an absolute nightmare in this patch to scan them. It's not too bad when they're really big ships and it's easier to track them, but the scanner seems to jump from target to target on its own and it's just irritating. Anyway, here we are taking on our first group, and we didn't really know which one we were trying to keep alive, so we just killed them all as best we could. The Constellation ships, they do seem to do quite a lot of damage in this patch, which is pretty cool. It's made the missions a lot harder. And on our first one, as you can see here, we got one medical supply and a load of other rubbish. So on the second ship here, again, we got nothing really that great. All ones, ones, ones. And on the third ship, absolutely nothing. So, you know, the Vaughn missions are good, but they're not always unbelievable. So we had a little visit from the boss. He wasn't happy with our earnings from the first Vaughn mission, so he quickly popped over, and we had a little meeting in the back of the Corsair. Once he'd said what he needed to say, it was time for him to hop off back to his Andromeda, and we headed out for our second Vaughn mission. This one was a most trying task. I think that might be the top tier tasks, so we were hoping to get some good loot from this one. And the top tier, I think if you lose a mission or don't complete it for any reason, it immediately drops you down to the lower tier. So you only get one chance to keep doing them successfully, and if you don't, it will drop you down a tier, and then you have to not work your way back up, but I think you do 1 or 2 missions and then you're back up to top tier again. So in this second Vaughn mission, we had a completely empty C2. We didn't trust the scanner, so we quickly opened it up just to check it. And then we had to head off for our next Vaughn mission, which was back on Daymar. And luckily the comm array was still down, so we didn't have to go and do that again. And we took down an 890, which turned out to be empty as well. So that was the second 890 of the patch that I've seen that had absolutely nothing on it. But luckily, just before this ship, we had killed a C2. And we were hoping that this ship wouldn't head down and hit it. But as you can see in the background there, we have our C2 that we'd previously killed. And it has 30 SCU of Weaver legs on board. So this was a pretty good find. Vaughn missions, I think, do give you slightly higher loot numbers. And so you can do them if you want. They are a bit longer because you've got to take down the comm array. But, you know, not getting the criminal record for doing the missions is so great. And there's no reason not to do them, really. I think they're pretty good fun. If you're doing the highest level ones, they are definitely better than any of the tiers below. So here we transfer all the loot. We've got our 30 SCU of Weaver legs. And there was 132 SCU container of Bexaline, which was pretty good as well. So this time we headed over to Delvin Scrapyard. It was quite a big hand-in, so we wanted to make sure we went to a quiet area. And upon arriving there, there were some weird glitches and a lot of containers hanging around that shouldn't be there. So we quickly got rid of them before we unloaded the ship. And then it was time to get all the Weaver legs off. So we tested the elevator was still working, just because sometimes you get to these terminals and the elevators do not work. And then we got the rest of the loot off, and we went to lower it down. Again, we had a bit of an issue with the terminal, which was quite nerve-wracking, because when you're handing in quite a lot of money, not to be able to use the terminal is kind of a defining factor. You really need to be able to use that terminal quickly. Putting our tractor beam away seemed to help a lot. And we finally got in the terminal, and we lowered down the goods. So for our 30 SCU of Weaver legs, we got 3,375,000, which I split in half with my friend, and it was 1.65 million each, which was a pretty good payday just for doing one mission. If you were doing that solo, you just made 3.3 million. We've also got this massive container of Bexalite, and I do put this one at Seraphim because unfortunately at the time of recording this I just couldn't sell anything at Orison, so I just thought I'll chuck everything at Seraphim, one day I'll get a C2 and just take it all down to Orison. Another cool thing about this patch is now that people have got these cargo missions, you do see a lot of people just around the verse, whether they're transporting stuff from place to place, and there's a lot of landing going, taking off at the bases, but you also get to see people loading up their ships at like mining areas, and this was pretty cool. I just arrived to get a repair, and these two guys were loading up their C2 for quite a while. I did have to wait a few minutes, and I thought to myself, shall I just shoot off to another place? But in the end I just thought, nah, I'll stick around, watch them, check out them loading up the C2, and then I'll repair when they're finished. I wasn't in much of a rush, and I was just enjoying the new patch. And it is cool to see these different elements of gameplay, and it's making the verse a little bit more active. These guys were working hard for like 15 minutes just to load up that whole C2, and they were probably going to get a pretty good payday for going and handing that in somewhere. It did take quite a while for the cargo elevator on the right over there just to keep bringing up the containers. I'm not sure if you manually select what you're going to bring up each time or whether it just keeps spewing out containers, but these guys, like I say, they took about 15 minutes to load up a C2. But there we go, guys. That's our first thoughts on patch 3.24. The ERT missions and the Vaughn missions are giving us some good loot. There's some good money to be made there. The cargo missions, if that's your kind of thing, there's probably some good money to be made there as well, and they do seem to be working quite well. In the next video, we are going to check out some FPS action, because the AI are much more responsive now, and those missions are a lot tougher than they used to be. So stay tuned, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. And until then, take it easy.